Hello everyone, I'm at the hour, so hello you all, hope you're all doing very well tonight. At least it's, well, better at least than one would have said. Well no, you're saying you're doing one, I don't know why I'm making generic platitudes and then double thinking them. That's that classic SkitterSkreetch energy, you know, you gotta, you know it, you know it, you love it. Words. Really good at those. It's, lucky I don't have to do words very often. It's lucky that's not my whole thing or anything, god, that'd be awful. Anyway, no. I know that everyone here is here for the art, so it's fine. What are we doing today? So, words and things, yes. So, working down the list, as habit. No new followers since last time, no badges today. This is over, Abbe. You're an inspiration to us all. And speaking of Abbe, what we do have to do is, first things first, gonna mark another victory for Abbe in the first race. That's number 22. There we are. And then we do have a new book to show you today, so we'll go do that. I happen to, during the last couple of days, I haven't been feeling up to much, but I did go out and about a little bit in the library, and I stumbled across this here copy of Grimm's Fairy Tales. So we do have a little something to show off. Now, what you call it? This is quite an unusual one for me. Yeah, I mean, it's, what you call it? It happens. What you call it? The thing you got to sort of really understand is that through that, you know, I'm quite happy and upbeat on here. I am trapped alone, deep underground in you know, a kind of giant cavern of isolated horrors and monsters. You know, like, I try and keep an upbeat attitude, but sometimes it just gets a bit much. So don't worry about it too much. You know, just a thing that happens sometimes. But yeah, doing good today. Oh yeah, we come across this copy of Grimm's Fairy Tales. Hey, Wild, good to have you. Okay, I'll hydrate right then. Your elf, Nostrovia. What's that? Ah, yes, but yeah. Come across this copy of Grimm's Fairy Tales. Now, if you're a particularly attentive watcher of SkitterSkreetch, you might notice something a little unusual here, in that this copy of Grimm's Fairy Tales is one single book. Now, most of the short stories I get, they're bound into individual little like pamphlets, small books, and not all in one volume. I don't know why that is. Lamp has some detail about the way that the Wizards used to do their publishing, like they had a specific system, they had some imprint that was specialised in something or other, I don't know. But, you know, they liked it that way. But this copy isn't, which, according to Lamp, implies that he's an... probably an outside copy. So, yeah. But other than that, what is there to say? Not much. It's new, something that I look forward to enjoy. Oh, I am not here. Why am I not here? You never know. Anyway, but what am I doing today? I'm talking to you. That's one thing. Yeah. So outside copy. Oh, there I'm back. I don't know what happens sometimes, but yeah. So what are we doing today? Well, today we are, comme d'habitude. Where would that come from? Do I speak French? Sometimes I do, but it seems strange to be doing it. Anyway, what was this? But yeah. Yeah. Today we are, as usual, going to be reading some stories. Just going to do some of the Fitzgeralds. I was only going to try and do an hour's worth and just have it be a light, quick stream, but the length of them is a little bit iffy, so we might be going a little bit longer than that. We'll see how we go. Other than that, we are going to be, yeah, as per usual, doing a little bit of poetry to start. I have some Fitzgerald poetry. So, yeah, I found a little pamphlet of his. There's not a lot of it, but we'll do that. Yeah, and that's what the plan is. So, seeing as we're doing all Fitzgerald, let's head over to his little thing for the thing. And, yeah, let's start with that. Let me just move the mic over so it's proper for our poetry, and then we'll begin. And there we are. So then, Poetry, poetry, poetry. I have 4 of his poems for you today, and I think we'll stick with all of them, so... what have we got? First things first. Sleep of a University. Watching through the long dim hours, like statued Mithras, stand ironic towers, their haughty lines severe by light, are softened and gain tragedy at night. Self-conscious cynics of their charge, proudly they challenge the dreamless world at large. From pseudo-ancient Nassau Hall the bell crashes the hour, as if to pretend all's well over the campus. The listless breeze floats down along drowsily, filtering through the trees whose twisted branches seem to lie like points d'Alençon lance against the sky. Of soft grey black, a gorgeous robe, buttoned with stars and o'er a tiny globe. With life far off, peace sits supreme. The college slumbers in a fatuous dream, while watching through the moonless hours, like statued Mithras stand the ironic towers. And that was Sleep of a University. Next we have Rain Before Dawn. The dull faint pattern in the drooping hours drifts in upon my sleep and fills my hair with damp, the burdens of the heavy air, and strewn upon me where my tired soul cowers, shrinking like some lone queen in empty towers. Dying blind with unrest I grow aware. The pounding of broad wings drifts down the stair and states me like the heavy scent of flowers. I lie upon my heart, my eyes like hands grip at the soggy pillow. Now the dawn, tears from her wetted breast, the splattered brows, blouse of night. Lead eyes and moist she straggles o'er the lawn, between the curtains brooding stares and stands, like some drenched swimmer, death's within the house. Following that, we have We Leave Tonight. We leave tonight. Silent we fill the still deserted street. A column of dim grey and ghosts rose startled at the muffled beat. Along the moonless way the shadow shipyards echoed to the feet that turned from night and day. And so we linger on the windless deck, see on the spectre shore shades of 1,000 days, poor grey-ribbed wrecks. Oh, shall we then deplore those futile years? See how the sea is white, the clouds are broken and the heavens burn to hollow highways, paved with gravelled light. The churning of the waves about the stern rises to one voluminous nocturne. We leave tonight. And last of the Fitzgerald's poems I have City Dusk by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Come out, out, to this inevitable night of mine. O you drinker of new wine, here's pageantry, here's carnival, rich dusk, dim streets and all, the whispering of city night. I have closed my book of fading harmonies. The shadows fell across me in the park, and my soul was sad with violins and trees, and I was sick for dark, when suddenly it hastened by me, bringing thousands of lights, a haunting breeze, and a night of streets and sinning. I shall know you by your eager feet, and by your pale, pale hair. I'll whisper happy, incoherent things while I'm waiting for you there. All the faces unforgettable in dusk will blend to yours, and the footsteps like 1,000 overtures will blend to yours. And there will be more drunkenness than wine in the softness of your eyes on mine. Faint violins where lovely ladies dine, the brushing of skirts, the voices of the night, and all the lure of friendly eyes. Ah, there, will drift like summer sounds upon the summer air. And that was City Dusk by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The last of the poems which I have for you. So now let me move the microphone back to a more normal distance. And we'll begin with a little bit of prose, shall we? Ah, but I'm gone again. That's not good. Why do I keep disappearing? Can't be having that, that's no good at all. And the music started. Not a good night for it, eh? Well. Hopefully I'll come back. And if I don't, well, what's to be done, I suppose? Nothing to be done about it. Still. Oh, there I am. Well, hopefully I'll stay for now. You can never really tell. Anyhow, like I say, plan isn't to go very, very long tonight, but these stories are reasonably long by the standards of short stories, so we'll see how we go. Yeah. I think probably the one we'll be doing is the Rich Boy, because it's the shortest one other than an alcoholic case, and an alcoholic case is 8 pages. So it'll be done in probably 20 minutes if we just do that one. So. The Rich Boy. What do we do in May Day? I do like to do them all in order, but May Day's 50 pages, and that'll probably be more like 3 hours. We'll do the Rich Boy. Well, the diamond as big as the rich isn't much longer. Decisions. Let's do diamond. It's 2 pages difference. That might last. But yeah, let me have a quick drink of water and while I do my little spiel. So, as always, if at any point you should miss something that has been said, either because I've been unclear and stumbled in my words, because there's been a technical fault of some sort, or simply because you've had something distract you in the real world, feel free to let me know and I'm happy to go back over anything. If your thoughts, comments, questions, this does look like it's broken into chapters, so feel free to let me know and I'm happy to do either long ones after the chapters or just quick comments in between as we go along. Other than that, well, nothing else other than that really, so without any further ado, if you are sitting comfortably, I shall begin. The diamond as big as the Ritz. Chapter 1. John Unger come from a family that had been well known in Hades, a small town on the Mississippi River, for several generations. John's father had held the amateur golf championship through many an heated contest. Mrs. Unger were known from hot box to hot bed, as the local phrase went, for her political addresses, and young John Unger, who had just turned 16, had danced all the latest dances from New York before he put on long trousers. And now, for a certain time, he would be away from home. That respect for a New England education, which is the bane of all provincial places, which drains them yearly of their most promising young men, had seized upon his parents. Nothing would suit them but that he should go to St Midas' school near Boston. Hades were too small to hold their darling and gifted son. Now, in Hades, as you know if you've ever been there, the name of the more fashionable preparatory schools and colleges mean very little. Appreciate it, well, I'd have a good look. The inhabitants have been so long out of the world that, though they make a show of keeping up to date in dress and manner and literature, they depend to a great extent on hearsay, and a function that in Hades would be considered elaborate would doubtless be hailed by a Chicago beef princess as perhaps a little tacky. John Unger were on the eve of departing. Mrs. Unger, with maternal fatuity, packed his trunk full of linen suits and electric fans, and Mr. Unger presented his son with an asbestos pocketbook stuffed with money. "Remember, you are always welcome here," he said. "You can be sure, boy, that we'll be keeping the home fires burning. "I know," answered John huskily. "Don't forget who you are and where you come from," continued his father proudly, "and that you can do nothing to harm you. You're an Unger from Hades." So the old man and the young shook hands, and John walked away with tears streaming from his eyes. 10 minutes later he had passed outside the city limits, and he stopped to glance back for the last time. Over the gates, the old-fashioned Victorian motto seemed strangely attractive to him. His father had tried time and time again to have it changed to something with a little more push and verve about it, such as "Hades, your opportunity," or as a plain welcome sign set over an hearty handshake pricked out in electric lights. The old motto were a little depressing, Mr. Unger had thought. But now? So John took his look and then set his face resolutely towards his destination. And as he turned away, the lights of Hades against the sky seemed full of a warm and passionate beauty. St Midas' school is half an hour from Boston in a Rolls-Pierce motor car. The actual distance will never be known, for no one except John Unger had ever arrived there save in a Rolls-Pierce, and probably no one ever will again. St Midas is the most expensive and the most exclusive boys' preparatory school in the world. John's first 2 years there passed pleasantly. The fathers of all the boys were money kings, and John spent his summers visiting at fashionable resorts. While he was very fond of all the boys he visited, their fathers struck him as being much of a piece, and in his boyish way he often wondered at their exceeding sameness. When he told them where his home was, they would ask jovially, "Pretty hot down there?" And John would muster a faint smile and answer, "It certainly is." His response would have been heartier had they not all made this joke, at best varying it with, "Is it hot enough for you down there?" which he hated just as much. In the middle of his second year at school, a quiet, handsome boy named Percy Washington had been put in John's form. The newcomer was pleasant in his manner, and exceedingly well dressed even for St Midas's, but for some reason he kept aloof from the other boys. The only person with whom he were intimate was John Unger, but even the Johnny were entirely uncommunicative concerning his home or his family. They were wealthy went without saying, but beyond a few such deductions, John knew little of his friend, so it promised rich confectionery for his curiosity, and Percy invited him to spend the summer at his home in the West. He accepted without hesitation. It was only when they were in the train that Percy had become, for the first time, rather communicative. One day, while they were eating lunch in the dining car and discussing the imperfect character of several of the boys at their school, Percy suddenly changed his tone and made an abrupt remark. "My father," he said, "is by far the richest man in the world." "Ah," said John politely. He could think of no answer to make this confidence. He considered. He considered that's very nice, but it sounded hollow. And he were on the point of saying, "Really?" but refrained, since it would seem to question Percy's statement. And such an astounding statement could scarcely be questioned. "By far the richest," repeated Percy. "I was reading in the World Almanac," began John. "There was one man in America with an income of over 50 million a year, and 4 men with incomes of over 3 million a year. An income of over 5 million a year, and 4 men with incomes of over 3 million a year. And they're nothing." Percy's mouth were an half moon of scorn. "Catchpenny capitalists, financial small fry, petty merchants, and money-lenders. My father could buy them out and not know he'd done it. But how does he? Why haven't they put down his income tax? Because he doesn't pay any. At least he pays a little on. He doesn't pay any on his real income." "He must be very rich," said John simply. "I'm glad. I like very rich people. The richer a fellow is, the better I like him." There were a look of passionate frankness upon his dark face. "I visited the Schnitzer Murphys last Easter. Vivian Schnitzer Murphy had rubies as big as hen's eggs, and sapphires that were like globes with lights inside them." "I love jewels," agreed Percy enthusiastically. "Of course I wouldn't want anyone at school to know about it, but I've got quite a collection myself. I used to collect them instead of stamps." "And diamonds," continued John eagerly. "The Schnitzer Murphys had diamonds as big as walnuts." "That's nothing." Percy had leaned forward and dropped his voice to a low whisper. "That's nothing at all. My father has a diamond bigger than the Ritz-Carlton Hotel." And that's the end of chapter 1. So when the title was a diamond as big as the Ritz, I sort of assumed, like financially as big as the Ritz. Like this diamond is as valuable as the Ritz Hotel. Apparently not. Apparently it's actually the size. Well, that's interesting. Let's see where it's going with it, shall we? Chapter 2. The Montana sunset lay between two mountains like a gigantic bruise, from which dark arteries spread themselves over a poisoned scar. An immense distance under the scar crouched the village of Fish, minute, dismal, and forgotten. There was 12 men, Server said, in the village of Fish, 12 sombre and inexplicable souls, who sucked the lean milk from the almost literally bare rock upon which a mysterious populatory force had begotten them. They had become a race apart, these 12 men of Fish, like some species developed by an early woman nature, which on second thought had abandoned them to struggle and extermination. Out of the blue-black bruise in the distance crept a long line of moving light upon the desolation of the land, and the 12 men of Fish gathered like ghosts at the shanty depot to watch the passing of the 7 o'clock train, the Transcontinental Express from Chicago. 6 times or so a year, the Transcontinental Express, through some inconceivable jurisdiction, stopped at the village of Fish, and when this occurred, a figure or so would disembark, mount into a buggy that always appeared from out of the dusk, and drive off towards the bruised sunset. The observation of this pointless and preposterous phenomenon had become a sort of cult among the men of Fish. To observe, that was all. There remained in them none of the vital quality of illusion which would have made them wonder or speculate, else a religion might have grown up around these mysterious visitations. But the men of Fish were beyond all religion. The bariest and most savage tenets of even Christianity could gain no foothold on that barren rock. So there were no altar, no priest, no sacrifice. Only each night at 7 the silent concourse by the shanty depot, a congregation who lifted up a prayer of dim, anemic wonder. On this June night, the great brakeman, whom, had they deified anyone, they might well have chosen as their celestial protagonist, had ordained that the 7 o'clock train should leave its human or inhuman deposit at Fish. At 2 minutes after 7, Percy Washington and John Unger disembarked, hurried past the spell down to the agape of the fearsome eyes of the 12 men of Fish, mounted into a buggy, which had obviously appeared from nowhere, and drove away. After half an hour, when the twilight had coagulated in the dark, the silent negro who was driving the buggy held an opaque body somewhere ahead of them in the gloom. In response to his cry, it turned upon them a luminous disc which regarded them like a malignant eye out of the unfathomable night. As they come closer, John saw that it was the tail light of an immense automobile, larger and more magnificent than any he had ever seen. Its body were of gleaming metal, richer than nickel and lighter than silver, and the hubs of the wheels were studded with iridescent geometric figures, green and yellow. John did not dare to guess whether they were glass or jewels. 2 negroes, dressed in glittering livery such as one sees in the pictures of royal processions in London, would stand at attention beside the car. As the 2 young men dismounted from the buggy, they were greeted in some language which the guests could not understand, which seemed to be an extreme form of the southern negro's dialect. "Get in," said Percy to his friend, as their trunks was tossed into the ebony roof of the limousine. "Sorry we had to bring you that far in that buggy, but of course it wouldn't do for the people in the train or those godforsaken fellows at Fish to see this automobile." "Gosh, what a car!" This ejaculation was provoked by its interior. John saw that the upholstery consisted of 1,000 minute and exquisite tapestries of silk, woven with jewels and embroideries, and set upon a background of cloth of gold. The 2 armchair seats in which the boys luxuriated was covered with stuff that resembled duvetting, that seemed woven in numberless colours to the ends of the woven in numberless colours at the ends of ostrich feathers. "What a car!" cried John again in amazement. "This thing," Percy laughed. "Why, it's just an old junk we use for a station wagon." By this time they was gliding along through the darkness towards the break between the 2 mountains. "We'll be there in an hour and a half," said Percy, looking at the clock. "I may as well tell you it's not going to be like anything you've ever saw before." If the car were any indication of what John would see, he was prepared to be astounded indeed. The simple piety prevalent in Hades had the earnest worship and respect for riches as the first article in creed. Had John felt otherwise than radiantly humble before them, his parents would have turned their way in horror at the blasphemy. They had now reached and were entering the break between the two mountains, and almost immediately the way became much rougher. "If the moon shone down here, you'd see that we're in a big gulch," said Percy, trying to peer out the window. He spoke a few words into the mouthpiece, and immediately the footman turned on a searchlight and struck the hillside with an immense beam. "Rocky, you see? An ordinary car would be knocked to pieces in half an hour. In fact, it would take a tank to navigate it unless you know the way. You notice we're going uphill now." They was obviously ascending, and within a few minutes the car were crossing an rise where they caught a glimpse of a pale moon newly risen in the distance. The car stopped suddenly, and several figures took shape out of the dark beside it. These were negroes also. Again the two young men were saluted, in the same dimly recognisable dialect. Then the negroes set to work, and 4 immense cables dangling from overhead was attached with hooks to the hubs of the great jewelled wheels. A resounding "Hey-yah!" John felt the car being lifted slowly from the ground, up and up, clear of the tallest rocks on both sides, then higher, until he could see a wavy moonlit valley stretched out before him in a sharp contrast to the quagmire of rocks that they had just left. Only on one side were there still rock, and then suddenly there were no rock beside them or anywhere around. It were apparent that they had surmounted some immense knife blade of stone, projecting perpendicularly into the air. In a moment they were going down again, and finally, with a soft bump, they were landed upon the smooth earth. "The worst is over," said Percy, squinting out the window. "It's only 5 miles from here, and our own road, tapestry brick, all the way. This belongs to us. This is where the United States end, Father says." "Are we in Canada?" "We are not. We are in the middle of the Montana Rockies. You are now on the only 5 square miles of land in the country that's never been surveyed." "Why hasn't it? They forget it?" "No," said Percy, grinning. "They tried to do it 3 times. The first time my grandfather corrupted a whole department of the state survey. The second time he had the official maps of the United States tinkered with. That held them for 15 years. The last time was harder. My father fixed it so their compasses were in the strongest magnetic field ever artificially set up. He had a whole set of surveying instruments made with a slight deflection that would allow for this territory not to appear, and he substituted them for the ones that were to be used. Then he had a river deflected, and he had what looked like a village built up on its banks, so that they'd see it and think it was the town 10 miles farther up the valley. There's only one thing my father's afraid of," he concluded. "Only one thing in the world that could be used to find us out. Hey, Naska, no worry about being late. We are reading The Diamond as Big as the Ritz, and just to catch you up, we're partway through chapter 2. We've been introduced to a young man from a good family from a small town called Ladies, who's gone to a good school in New England called St Midas, and he's chummed up with a fellow of classmate of his named Percy, who claims that his father is the richest man in the world, which has come as a bit of a surprise because he was quite quiet about it. And we've gotten off off the train in a town in the middle of nowhere, ridden out on a coach and wagon to get to a very fancy limousine, which we've now driven into the Rockies, and gone up like a secret trail, and then been lifted by cables into another place past the Rockies into what is apparently a secret place hidden from the entirety of the US government, which belongs to this supposed richest man. And that's where we're at. Oh, and everything, like the limousine has been described as being ridiculously lovely. Oh, and Percy's claimed to own a diamond that is larger than the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Hence the name of the story, and that's where we're at. Wow. But yeah, there we are. Only one thing in the world that could be used to find us out. What's that? Percy sank his voice to a whisper. Aeroplanes, he breathed. We've got 6 anti-aircraft guns, and we've arranged it so far. But there have been a few deaths and a great many prisoners. Wouldn't we mind that, you know, Father and I? It upsets Mother and the girls, and there's always the chance that sometime we won't be able to arrange it. Stretch and tatters of chinchilla, courtesy clouds in the green moon's heaven were passing the green moon like precious eastern stuffs paraded for the inspection of some Tartar camp. Can't, sorry. It seemed to John that it was day, and he were looking at us, at some lads sailing above him in the air, showering down tracts and patent medicine circulars with their messages of hope for the despairing rock-bound ambulance. It seemed to him that he could see them look down out of the clouds and stare at whatever they were to stare at in this place, whether he were bound. What then? Was they induced to land by some insidious device, there to be immured far from patent medicines and from traces until the judgment day? Or should they fail to fall into the trap, did a quick puff of smoke and the sharp round of splitting shell bring them drooping to earth, and upset Percy's mother and sisters? John shook his head, and the wrath and hollow laugh issued silently from his parched lips. What desperate transaction lay hidden there? What amoral expedient of a bizarre crisis? What terrible and golden mystery? The chinchilla clouds had drifted past now, and outside the Montana night were bright as day. The tapestry brick of the road was smooth to the tread of the great tires as they rounded the still, moonlit lake. They passed into darkness for a moment, a pine grove pungent and cool. Then they come out into a broad avenue or lawn, and John's exclamation of pleasure was simultaneous with Percy's taciturn, "We're home." Full in the light of the stars, an exquisite chateau rose from the borders of the lake, climbed in marble radiance off the arc of an adjoining mountain, then melted in grace and perfect symmetry, in translucent feminine languor into the mass darkness of a forest of pine. The many towers, the slender tracery of the sloping parapets, the chiselled wonder of 1,000 yellow windows with their oblongs and hectagons and triangles of golden light, the shattered softness of the intersecting plains of starshine and blue shade, all trembled on John's spirit like a chord of music. On one of the towers, the tallest, the blackest at its base, an arrangement of exterior lights on the top made a sort of floating fairyland, and as John gazed up in warm enchantment at the faint Asiacere, sounds of violin drifted down in a rococo harmony that were like nothing he had ever heard before. Then, in a moment, the car stopped before wide, iron marble steps, around which the night air was fragrant with an host of flowers. At the top of the steps, 2 great doors swung silently open, and amber light flooded out upon the darkness, silhouetting the figure of an exquisite lady with black, high-piled hair, who held out her arms towards him. "Mother," Percy was saying, "this is my friend John Unger, from Hades." Afterwards, John remembered that first night as a daze of many colours, a quick sensory impressions, a music soft as a voice in love, and of the beauty of things, light and shadow and motions and faces. There was a white-haired man who stood drinking a many-hued cordial from a crystal thimble set upon a golden stem. There were a girl with flowery face, dressed like Titania, with braided sapphires in her hair. There were a room where the solid, soft gold of the walls yielded to the pressure of his hand, and a room that were like a platonic conception of the ultimate prison, ceiling, floors and all that were lined with an unbroken mass of diamonds of every size and shape, until lit with tall violet lamps in the corners it dazzled the eye with a whiteness that could be compared only with itself, beyond human wish or dream. Through a maze of these rooms the 2 boys wandered. Sometimes the floor under their feet would flame in brilliant patterns from lightning below, patterns of barbaric, clashing colours, of pastel delicacy, of the sheer whiteness or of subtle and intricate mosaic, surely from some mosque on the Adriatic Sea. Sometimes beneath layers of thick crystal we would see blue or green water swirling, inhabited by vivid fish and growths of rainbow foliage. Then there would be treading on furs of every texture and colour, or along a corridor of palest ivory, unbroken as though carved complete from the gigantic tusks of dinosaurs extinct before the age of man. Then an easily remembered transition, and they was at a dinner where each plate was of 2 almost imperceptible layers of solid diamond, between which were curiously worked a filigree of emerald design, a shaven slice from green air. Music, plangent and unobtrusive, drifted down through far corridors. His chair, feathered and curved insidiously to his back, seemed to engulf and overpower him as he drank his first glass of port. He tried drowsily to answer a question that had been asked him, but the only luxury that classed his body added to the illusion of sleep. Jewels, fabrics, wines, and metals blurred before his eyes into a sweet mist. "Yes," he replied with polite effort. "It certainly is hot enough for me down there." He managed to add a ghostly laugh, then, without movement, without resistance, he seemed to float off and away, leaving a nice dessert that was pink as a dream. He fell asleep. When he awoke, he knew that several hours had passed. You were in a great quiet room with ebony walls and a dull illumination that was too faint, too subtle to be called light. His young host was standing over him. "You fell asleep at dinner," Percy was saying. "I nearly did too. It was such a treat to be comfortable again after the years of school." Servants undressed and bathed you while you were sleeping. "It was a bed or a cloud," sighed John. Percy, before you go, I want to apologise." "For what?" "For doubting you when you said you had a diamond as big as the Ritz Hotel." Percy smiled. "I thought you didn't believe me. It's that mountain, you know." "What mountain?" "The mountain the chateau rests on. It's not very big for a mountain, but except for about 50 feet of sod and gravel on top, it's solid diamond. 1 cubic mile without flaw. Aren't you listening? Say." But John Unger had again fallen asleep. That's the end of chapter 3. Now there we are. A true fairyland. The sort of thing that rich people ought to be doing with their money rather than, destroying the world. I mean, admittedly, even this is an absurd and disgusting degree of luxury that is a terrible waste. But at least it's not harming anyone. Sounds like something out of an old fairy story, really. A magical world of unreality. Where everything's just slightly off. Yeah, I don't think I got much else to say. So, if you don't got any objections, we should press on. Chapter 3. Morning. As he awoke, he perceived drowsily that the room had at the same moment become dense with sunlight. The ebony panels of one wall had slid aside on a sort of track, leaving his chamber half open for the day. A large negro in a white uniform stood beside his bed. "Good evening," muttered John, summoning his brains from the wild places. "Good morning, sir. Are you ready for your bath, sir? Oh, don't get up. I'll put you in if you'll just unbutton your pyjamas. There, thank you, sir." John lay quietly as his pyjamas was removed. He was amazed and delighted. He expected to be lifted like a child by this black gargantua who had tended him, but nothing of the sort happened. Instead, he felt the bed tilt up slowly on its side. It began to roll, startled at first, in the direction of the wall. But when he reached it, the wall in its drapery gave away, and sliding 2 yards farther down a fleecy incline, he plumped gently into water the same temperature as his body. He looked about him. The runway or rollway on which he had arrived had folded gently back into place. He had been projected into another chamber and was sitting in a sunken bath with his head just above the level of the floor. All about him, lining the walls of the room and the sides and the bottom of the bath itself, were a blue aquarium, and gazing through the crystal surface on which he sat, he could see fish swimming among amber lights and even gliding without curiosity past his outstretched toes, which were separated from them only by the thickness of the crystal. From overhead, sunlight come down through a sea-green glass. I suppose, sir, you like hot Welsh water and soap suds this morning, and perhaps cold salt water to finish." The negro was standing beside him again. "Yes," agreed John, smiling insanely. "As you please." Any idea of ordering this bath according to his own meagre standard of living would have been priggish, and not a little wicked. The negro pressed a button, and a warm rain began to fall, apparently from overhead, but really, so John discovered after a moment, from a fountain arrangement nearby. The water turned to a pale rose colour, and jets of liquid soap spurted into it from the 4 miniature walrus heads at the corners of the bath. In a moment, a dozen little paddle wheels fixed to the sides had churned the mixture into a radiant rainbow of pink foam, which enveloped him softly with its delicious lightness and burst and shine in rosy bubbles here and there about him. "Shall I turn on the moving picture machine, sir?" suggested the Negro deferentially. "There's a good one-reel comedy in the machine today, or I can put in a serious piece in a moment if you prefer it." "No, thanks," answered John, politely but firmly. He was enjoying his bath too much to desire any distraction. A distraction came. In a moment he was listening intently to the sound of flutes from just outside, flutes dripping a melody that were like a waterfall, cool and green as the room itself, accompanying a frothy piccolo in a play more fragile than the lace of suds that covered and charmed him. After a cold saltwater bracer and a cold fresh finish, he stepped out and into a fleecy robe, and upon a couch covered with the same material he was rubbed with oil, alcohol and spice. Later he sat in a voluptuous chair while he was shaved and his hair was trimmed. "Mr. Percy is waiting in your sitting room," said the Negro, when his operations was finished. "My name is Gigson, Mr. Unger, sir. I am to see Mr. Unger every morning." John walked out in the brisk sunshine of his living room, where he found breakfast waiting for him, and Percy, gorgeous in white kid knickerbockers, smoking in an easy chair. And that's the end of chapter 3. Nothing really to say on that, so we'll press on. Chapter 4. This is the story of the Washington family as Percy sketched it for John during breakfast. The father of the present Mr. Washington had been a Virginian, a direct descendant of George Washington and Lord Baltimore. At the close of the Civil War, he was 25 years old, a colonel with a played-out plantation and about $1,000 in gold. Culpeper Washington, for that was the young colonel's name, decided to present the Virginian estate to his younger brother and go west. He selected 24 of the most faithful blacks who, of course, worshipped them, and bought 25 tickets to the west, where he intended to take out land in their names and start a sheep and cattle ranch. When he had been in Montana for less than a month, and things was going very poorly indeed, he stumbled upon his great discovery. He had lost his way while riding in the hills, and after a day without food, he began to grow hungry. As he wore out his rifle, he was forced to pursue a squirrel, and in the course of the pursuit, he noticed that it was carrying something shiny in its mouth. Just before it vanished into its hole, for Providence did not intend that this squirrel should alleviate his hunger, it dropped its burden. Sitting down to consider the situation, Fitznorman's eyes was caught by a gleam in the grass beside him. In 10 seconds, he had completely lost his appetite and gained $100,000. The squirrel, which had refused with the annoying persistence to become food, had made him a present of a large and perfect diamond. Late that night he found his way to camp, and 12 hours later all the males among his darkies were back by the squirrel hole, digging furiously at the side of the mountain. He told them he had discovered a rhinestone mine, and, as only 1 or 2 of them had ever seen a small diamond before, they believed him, without question. When the magnitude of his discovery became apparent to him, he found himself in a quandary. The mountain were a diamond. It was literally nothing else but solid diamond. He filled 4 saddlebags full of glittering samples and started on horseback for St Paul. There he managed to dispose of half a dozen small stones. When he tried a larger one, a storekeeper fainted, and Fitznorman were arrested as a public disturber. He escaped from jail and caught the train for New York, where he sold a few medium-sized diamonds and received in exchange about $200,000 in gold. He did not dare to produce any exceptional gems. In fact, he left New York just in time. Tremendous excitement had been created in jewellery circles, not so much by the size of his diamonds as by their appearance in the city from mysterious sources. Wild rumours became current that a diamond mine had been discovered in the Catskills, on the Jersey coast, on Long Island, beneath Washington Square. Excursion trains packed with men carrying picks and shovels began to leave New York hourly, and for various neighbouring Eldorados. But by that time, young Fitznorman were on his way back to Montana. By the end of a fortnight, he had estimated the diamonds in the mountain were approximately equal in quantity to all the rest of the diamonds known to exist in the world. There was no value in it by any regular computation, however, for it was one solid diamond. And if it were offered for sale, not only would the bottom fall out of the market, but also, if the value should vary with its size in the usual arithmetical progression, then there would not be enough gold in the world to buy a tenth part of it. And what could anyone do with a diamond that size? He was in an amazing predicament. He was, in one sense, the richest man that ever lived, and yet was he worth anything at all? If his secrets should transpire, there were no telling what measures the government might resort in order to prevent a panic in gold as well as in jewels. They might take over the claim immediately and institute a monopoly. There were no alternative. He must market his mountain in secret. He sent south for his younger brother and put him in charge of the coloured following, dark as he would never realise that slavery were abolished. To make sure of this, he read them a proclamation that he had composed, which announced that General Forrest had reorganised the shattered southern armies and defeated the North in one pitched battle. The negroes believed him implicitly. They passed a vote declaring it a good thing and held revival services immediately. Fitznorman himself set out for foreign parts with $100,000 and 2 trunks filled with rough diamonds of all sizes. He sailed for Russia in a Chinese junk, and 6 months after his departure from Montana, he was in St Petersburg. He took obscure lodgings and called immediately upon the court jeweller and answered he had a diamond for the Tsar. He remained in St Petersburg for 2 weeks, in constant danger of being murdered, living from lodging to lodging and afraid to visit his trunks more than 3 or 4 times during the old fortnight. On his promise to return in a year with a larger and finer stone, he was allowed to leave for India. Before he left, however, the court treasurer had deposited to his credit in American banks the sum of $15 million under 4 different aliases. He returned to America in 1868, having been gone a little over 2 years. He visited the capitals of 22 countries and talked with 5 emperors, 11 kings, 3 princes, a shah, a khan, and a sultan. At that time, Fitznorman estimated his own wealth at $1 billion. One fact worked consistently against the disclosure of his secret. No one of his larger diamonds remained in the public eye for a week before being invested with an history of enough fatalities, amours, revolutions and wars to have occupied it from the days of the First Babylonian Empire. From 1870 until his death in 1900, the history of Fitznorman Washington were a long epic in gold. There were side issues, of course. He evaded the surveys, he married a Virginia lady by whom he had a single son, and he was compelled, due to a series of unfortunate complications, to murder his brother, whose unfortunate habit of drinking himself into an indiscreet stupor had several times endangered their safety. Very few other murders stained these happy years of progress and expansion. Just before he died, he changed his policy, and with all but a few $1 million of his outside wealth, bought up rare minerals in bulk, which he deposited in the safety vaults of banks all over the world, marked as bric-a-brac. His son, Braddock Tarleton Washington, followed this policy on an even more intensive scale. The minerals was converted into the rarest of all elements, radium, so the equivalent of $1 billion in gold could be placed in a receptacle no bigger than a cigar box. When Fitznorman had been dead 3 years, his son, Braddock, decided that the business had gone far enough. The amount of wealth that he and his father had taken out of the mountain were beyond all exact computation. He kept a notebook and a cipher, in which he set down the approximate quantity of radium in each of the 1,000 banks he had patronised, and recorded the alias under which it were held. Then he did a very simple thing. He sealed up the mine. What had been taken out of it would support all the Washingtons yet to be born in unparalleled luxury for generations. His one care must be the protection of his secret, lest in a possible panic attendant on its discovery he should be reduced with all the property holders in the world to utter poverty. This was the family among whom John Unger was staying. This was the story he heard in his silver-walled living room the morning after his arrival. That's the end of chapter 4. Well, I do appreciate an honest story of becoming wealthy, in which, of course, the wealthy person in question illegally holds men as slaves and causes quite a few murders, including the murder of his own brother. Nice to have an honest accounting of wealth, you know? No virtuous rich people here, these are all bastards. You know, like real rich people. Is there anything else to say on that? I think probably there would be something to say if I knew more about the trade of precious commodities and gemstones. But yeah, I do like the little tidbit that any particularly notable gem immediately accrues a history of like murder and seduction and all this. Because that is the thing that happens to large gems in the real world. That's fun. At any rate, pressing on. Chapter 5. After breakfast, John found his way out of the great marble entrance and looked curiously at the scene before him. The old valley, from the Diamond Mountain to the steep granite cliff 5 miles away, still gave off a breath of golden haze which hovered idly above the fine sweep of lawns and lakes and gardens. Here and there clusters of elms made delicate groves of shade, contrasting strangely with the tough masses of palm forest that held the hills in a grip of dark blue-green. Even as John looked, he saw 3 fawns in a single file patter out from one clump about an half mile away, and disappear with awkward gaiety into the black-ribbed afterlight of another. John would not have been surprised to see a goatfoot piping his way among the trees to catch a glimpse of pink nymph skin, a flying yellow hair between the greenest of the green leaves. In some such cool hope he descended the marble steps, disturbing the sleep of 2 silky Russian wolfhounds at the bottom, and set off along a walk of white and blue brick that seemed to lead in no particular direction. He was enjoying himself as much as he were able. It is youth's felicity, as well as its insufficiency, that can never live in the present, and must always be measuring up the day against its own radiantly imagined future. Flowers and gold, girls and stars, they are only prefigurations and prophecies of the incomparable, inattainable young dream. John rounded a soft corner where the massed rose bushes filled the air with a heavy scent, and struck off across a path towards a patch of moss under some trees. He had never lain upon moss, and he wanted to see whether it were really soft enough to justify the use of its name as an adjective. Then he saw a girl coming towards him over the grass. She was the most beautiful person he had ever seen. She was dressed in a white little gown that came just below her knee, and a wreath of mignonettes clasped with blue slices of sapphire bound up her hair. Her pink bare feet scattered the dew before them as she came. She was younger than John, not more than 16. "Hello," she cried softly. "I'm Kismet." She was much more than that to John already. He advanced towards her, scarcely moving as he drew near, lest he should tread on her bare toes. "You haven't met me," said her soft voice. Her blue eyes added, "Oh, but you've missed a great deal. You met my sister Jasmine last night. I was sick with letters poisoning," went on her soft voice. Her eyes continued, "And when I'm sick, I'm sweet, and when I'm well." "You've made an enormous impression on me," said John's eyes, "and I'm not so slow myself." "How d'you do?" said his voice. "I hope you're better this morning." "You darling," added his eyes tremulously. Very good, Abbot. Nastrovia, your elf. John observes they had been walking along the path. On her suggestion, they sat down together upon the moss, the softness of which he failed to determine. He was critical about women. A single defect, a thick ankle, an hoarse voice, a glass eye, were enough to make him utterly indifferent, and here, for the first time in his life, he was beside a girl who seemed to him the incarnation of physical perfection. "Are you from the East?" asked Kismet with charming interest. "No," answered John simply. "I'm from Hades." Either she had never heard of Hades, or she could think of no pleasant comment to make upon it, but she did not discuss it further. "I'm going east to a school this fall," she said. "Do you think I'll like it? I'm going to New York, to Miss Bulger's. It's very strict. But you see, over the weekends I'm going to live at home with the family in our New York house, because Father heard that the girls had to go walking 2 by 2. "Your father wants you to be proud," observed John. "We are," she answered, her eyes shining with dignity. "None of us has ever been punished. Father said we never should be. Once when my sister Jasmine was a little girl, she pushed him downstairs, and he just got up and limped away. Mother was, well, a little startled," continued Kismet, "when she heard that you were from from where you are from, you know? She said that when she was a young girl, but then you see she's a Spaniard and old-fashioned. You spend much time out here? Asked John, concealed the fact that he was somewhat hurt by this remark. It seemed an unkind allusion to his provincialism. Percy and Jasmine and I are here every summer. But next summer Jasmine is going to Newport. She's coming out in London a year from this fall. She'll be presented at court. Do you know, began John hesitantly, you're much more sophisticated than I thought you were when I first saw you. Oh no, I'm not, she exclaimed hurriedly. Oh, I wouldn't think of being. I think that sophisticated young people are terribly common, don't you? I'm not at all, really. If you say I am, I'm going to cry. She was so distressed that her lip was trembling. John were impelled to protest. I didn't mean that. I only said it to cheese you. And I'll stop there because we're about to go into acts. And even though they only work half the time, I hold to not talking about going on with the story during them. So, I'll see you on the other side. I'll have my customary swallow of water. And now we are in ads. So, for those of you who are not in ads, welcome to the secret section of the story. Or I said at the stream, I should say, not the story. Yeah. So what do you think of this so far? It's interesting. It's such a Fitzgerald story that it was almost a parody of a Fitzgerald story, or the absurd opulence and the crazy rich people who are clearly kind of evil and immoral in the way they got their wealth. It's a pastiche of his own writing almost. It's a good one. It's fun and sort of bombastic and over the top. I'm not sure we're making great time though. We're only about 16 pages in and it's 38 pages in total, so we're a little less than halfway, so it looks like we might, well, I guess the first 10 minutes was reading, so we might come out just about the 2-hour mark. It might go a little over, which, considering I was planning to go for an hour tonight, is a lot, but I'm enjoying it, so I don't mind. What is there to say? It's strange, really. The two things I'm really enjoying about this are both the absurd description of the luxurious things, because they are the sort of things that you sort of think, you know, it's a nice idea of what rich people are like, you know, this idea that there's these sort of exquisite, impossible things that they've paid for and made real, rather than just the sort of like garish, like excessive opulence that you generally do see with rich people, which is normal stuff but very expensive. And then I also like the fact that all of these rich people are, you know, clearly pretty evil, you know? Like, they're doing slavery and they're murdering their own brother. They're not good people, which, you know, isn't really a fear in a Fitzgerald story, but it's nice that they're just, you know, comically evil, comically luxurious. I'm enjoying it. It's a nice pastiche. Refreshing, you know? Yeah. I'm curious about the whole... there's a little theme of Greek mythology that I've noticed, you know, with the town of Hades and St Midas' school. I do sort of wonder where that's going. You know, I assume there's going to be some connection between that, but maybe I'm wrong. Don't know. It's also notable that they're the Washington family and direct descendants of George Washington, which doesn't factor into any reason at all why they're wealthy. They just are. That's just a little tidbit. I guess an archetypally American family. It's the archetypal American dream: finding a giant diamond in Montana under your sheep ranch, and then lying to the government about it. Ads are out the end, so I have a drink. And we should be back from the ads. And given that I'm a little worried about time, we'll press on immediately. So. I didn't mean that, I only said it to tease you. Because I wouldn't mind if I were, she persisted. But I'm not. I'm very innocent and girlish. I never smoke or drink or read anything except poetry. I know scarcely any mathematics or chemistry. I dress very simply. In fact, I scarcely dress at all. I think sophisticated is the last thing you can say about me. I believe girls ought to enjoy their youth in a wholesome way. I do too, said John heartily. His meaning were cheerful again. She smiled at him, and a stillborn tear dripped from the corner of one blue eye. "I like you," she whispered intimately. "Are you going to spend all your time with Percy while you're here, or will you be nice to me? Just think, I'm absolutely fresh ground. I've never had a boy in love with me in all my life. I've never been allowed even to see boys alone, except Percy. I came all the way out here into this grove hoping to run into you, where the family wouldn't be around." Deeply flattered, John bowed from the hips as he had been taught at dancing schools in Hades. "We'd better go now," said Gizmina sweetly. "I have to be with Mother at 11. You haven't asked me to kiss you once. I thought boys always did that nowadays." John drew himself up proudly. "Some of them do," he answered, "but not me. Girls don't do that sort of thing in Hades." Side by side, they walked back towards the house. That's very strange. Hang on. That is the end of chapter 5, but the next chapter is labelled chapter 4, which I'm just going to assume is an error in typography and not a clever bit of storytelling, so ignore it. Chapter 6. John stood facing Mr. Braddock Washington in the full sunlight. The elder man was about 40, with a proud, vacuous face, intelligent eyes, and a robust figure. In the morning he smelt of horses, the best horses. He carried a plain walking stick, a grey birch, with a single large opal for a grip. He and Percy were showing John around. The slayer's quarters are there. His walking stick indicated a cloister of marble on their left, ran in graceful Gothic along the side of the mountain. In my youth I was distracted from a while from the business of life by a period of absurd idealism. During that time they lived in luxury. For instance, I equipped every one of their rooms with a tile bath. I suppose, ventured John with an ingratiating laugh, they used the bathtubs to keep coal in. Mr. Schnitzer-Murphy told me that once The opinions of Mr. Schnitzer-Murphy are of a little importance, I should imagine, interrupted Braddock Washington coldly. My slaves did not keep coal in their bathtubs. They had orders to bathe every day, and they did. If they hadn't, I might have ordered a sulphuric acid shampoo. They discontinued the baths for quite another reason. Several of them caught cold and died. Water is not good for certain races, except as a beverage. John laughed, and then decided to nod his head in sober agreement. Braddock Washington made him uncomfortable. All these Negroes are descendants of the ones my father brought north with him. There are about 250 now. You notice they've lived so long apart from the world that their original dialect has become an almost indistinguishable patois. We bring a few of them up to speak English, my secretary and 2 or 3 of the house servants. This is the golf course, he continued as they strolled along the velvet winter grass. It's all green, you see. No fairway, no rough, no hazards. He smiled pleasantly at John. Many men in the cage, father? Asked Percy suddenly. Braddock Washington stumbled and let forth an involuntary curse. One less than there should be, he ejaculated darkly. Then after a moment, we've had difficulties. Mother was telling me, exclaimed Percy. That Italian teacher. A ghastly error, said Braddock Washington angrily. But of course there's a good chance we may have got him. Perhaps he fell somewhere in the woods or stumbled over a cliff. And then there's always the probability that he did get away. His story wouldn't be believed. Nevertheless, I've had 24 men looking for him in different towns around here. And no luck. Some. 14 of them reported to my agent they'd each killed the man answering to the description, but of course it was probably only the reward they were after. He broke off. They had come to a large cavity in the earth, about the circumference of a merry-go-round, covered by a strong iron grating. Braddock Washington beckoned to John and pointed his cane down through the grating. John stepped to the edge and gazed. Immediately his ears was assailed by a wild clamour from below. "Come on down to hell! Hey, kiddo, how's the air up there? Hey, throw us a rock. Got an old donut, buddy, or a couple of second-hand sandwiches? Say, fella, if you push down that guy you're with, we'll show you a quick disappearance scene. Paste him one for me, will ya?" With too dark to see clearly in the pit below, but John could hear from the coarse optimism and rugged vitality of the remarks and voices that proceeded from the middle-class Americans of the more spirited type. Then Mr. Washington put out his cane and touched a button in the grass, and the scene below sprang into light. "These are some of the ravenous mariners who had the misfortune to discover El Dorado," he remarked. Below them there had appeared a large hollow in the earth, shaped like the interior of a bowl. The sides were steep and apparently of polished glass, and on its slightly concave surface stood about 24 men, clad in the half costume, half uniform of aviators. Their upturned faces, lit with wrath and malice, with despair, with cynical humour, were covered by long groves of beard, but with the exception of a few who had pined perceptibly away, they seemed to be a well-fed, healthy lot. Braddock Washington drew a garden chair at the edge of the pit and sat down. "Well, how are you, boys?" he inquired genially. A chorus of execration, in which all joined, except a few too dispirited to cry out, rose up into the sunny air, but Braddock Washington heard it with an unruffled composure. When its last echoes had died away, he spoke again. "Have you thought of a way out of your difficulty?" From here and there among them a remark floated up. "We decided to stay over love. Bring us up there when we'll find a way." Braddock Washington waited until there was again quiet. Then he said, "I've told you the situation. I don't want you here. I wish to heaven I'd never seen you. Your own curiosity got you here, and any time that you can think of a way out which protects me and my interests, I'll be glad to consider it. But so long as you confine your efforts to digging tunnels, yes, I know about the new one you started, you won't get very far. This isn't as hard on you as you make it out, with all your howling for the loved ones at home. If you were the type who worried much about the loved ones at home, you'd never have taken up aviation." A tall man moved apart from the others and held up his hand to call his captain's attention to what you were about to say. "Let me ask you a few questions," he cried. "You pretend to be a fair-minded man." "How absurd! How could a man of my position be fair-minded towards you? You might as well speak of a Spaniard being fair-minded towards a piece of steak." At this last observation, the faces of the 24 steaks fell, but the man continued. "All right," he cried. "We've argued this out before. You're not a humanitarian and you're not fair-minded, but you're human. At least you say you are. You ought to be able to put yourself in odd places for long enough to think how what? How unnecessary, not to me. Well, how cruel. We've covered that. Cruelty doesn't exist when self-preservation is involved. You've been soldiers, you know that. Try another." "Well, then how stupid." "There," admitted Washington, "I grant you that. But try to think of an alternative. I've offered to have all or any of you painlessly executed if you wish. I've offered to have your wives, sweethearts, children and mothers kidnapped and brought out here. I'll enlarge your place down there and feed and clothe you for the rest of your lives. If there was some method of producing permanent amnesia, I'd have all of you operated on and released immediately, somewhere outside of my preserve. But that's as far as my ideas go." "How about trusting us not to peach on you?" cried someone. "You don't proffer that suggestion seriously," said Washington, with an expression of scorn. "I did take out one man to teach my daughter Italian. Last week he got away." A wild yell of jubilation went on suddenly from the 24 throats, and a pandemonium of joy ensued. The prisoners clog danced and cheered and yodeled and wrestled with one another in a sudden uprush of animal spirits. They even ran up the glass sides of the bowl as far as they could, and slid back to the bottom upon the natural cushion of all their bodies. The tall man started a song in which they all joined. "Oh, we'll angle with the cars are on a sour apple tree." Braddock Washington sat in inscrutable silence until the song were over. "You see," he remarked when he could gain a modicum of attention, "I bet you know you will. I like to see you enjoy yourselves. That's why I didn't tell you the whole story at once. The man, what was his name? Cricelecilio, was shot by some of my agents in 14 different places." Not guessing that the places referred to were cities, the tumult of rejoicing subsided immediately. "Nevertheless," cried Washington with a touch of anger, "he tried to run away. Do you expect me to take chances with any of you after an experience like that?" Again a series of ejaculations went on. "Sure. Would you like your daughters to learn Chinese? Hey, I can speak Italian, Mama, or what? Maybe you'd like to learn to speak New York. You see, the little one with the big blue eyes, I can teach her a lot of things better in Italian. You know some Irish songs, I could hammer a brass once." Mr. Washington reached forward suddenly with his cane and pushed the button in the grass, so the picture below went out instantly, and there remained only a great dark mouth covered dismally with black teeth of the grating. "Hey!" cried a single voice from below. "You ain't going away without giving us your blessing?" Mr. Washington, followed by the two boys, were already strolling on towards the nightfall of the golf course. as of the pit and its contents was no more than an hazard over which his facile iron had triumphed with ease. That's the end of chapter 6. So, an evil man. An evil, evil man indeed. Chapter 7, which, and this one is just marked 7, so I'm assuming the 4 was a typo. So chapter 7. July under the lee of the Diamond Mountain were a month of blanket nights and warm glowing days. John and Kismina were in love. He did not know that a little goal football, inscribed with the legend Pro Deo et Patria St Midas, which he had given her, rested on a platinum chain next to her bosom. But it did. And she, for her part, were not aware that the large sapphire, which had dropped one day from a simple coiffure, was stowed away tenderly in John's jewel box. Just pausing there for a minute, sort of struck there that John, the sort of poor boy in the scenario, has a jewel box. Late one afternoon, when the Ruby and Ermine music room were quiet, they spent an hour there together. He held her hand, and she gave him such a look that he whispered her name aloud. She bent towards him, then hesitated. "Did you say Kismine?" she asked softly. Or she had wanted to be sure. She thought he might have misunderstood. Neither of them had ever kissed before, but in the course of an hour it seemed to make little difference. The afternoon drifted away. That night, when the last breath of music drifted down from the ice tower, they each lay awake, happily dreaming over the separate minutes of the day. They had decided to be married as soon as possible. It's the end of chapter 7. Pressing right on to chapter 8. Every day Mr. Washington and the 2 young men went hunting, or fishing in the deep forests, or played golf around the solemn course, games which John diplomatically allowed his host to win, or swam in the mountain corners of the lake. John found Mr. Washington a somewhat exacting personality, utterly uninterested in any ideas or opinions except his own. Mrs. Washington were aloof and reserved at all times. She were apparently indifferent to her 2 daughters, and entirely absorbed in her son Percy, with whom she held interminable conversations in rapid Spanish at dinner. Jasmine, the elder daughter, resembled Kismina in appearance, except that she was somewhat bow-legged and terminated in large hands and feet, but utterly unlike her in temperament. Her favourite books had to do with poor girls who kept houses for widow fathers. John learned from Kismina that Jasmine had never recovered from the shock and disappointment caused by the termination of the World War, just as she were about to start for Europe as a canteen expert. She had ever pined away for a time, and Braddock Washington had taken steps to promote a new war in the Balkans. But she had seen a photograph of some wounded Serbian soldier and lost interest in the old proceedings. But Percy and Kismina seemed to have inherited the arrogant attitude and all its arse magnificence from their father. A chaste and consistent selfishness ran like pattern through their every idea. John were enchanted by the wonders of the chateau in the valley. Braddock Washington, so Percy told him, had caused to be kidnapped a landscape gardener, an architect, a designer of stage settings, and a French decadent poet left over from the last century. He put his entire force of Negroes at their disposal, guaranteed to supply them with any material the world could offer, and left them to work out some ideas of their own. But one by one they had shown their uselessness. The decadent poet had at once begun bewailing his separation from the boulevards in spring. He made some vague remark about spices, apes, and ivories, but said nothing that were any particular value. The stage designer, on his part, wanted to make the old valley a series of tricks and sensorial effects, a state of things that the Washingtons would soon have grown tired of. As for the architect and the landscape gardener, they thought in terms of convention. The trust makes this like... They must make this like this, and that like that. But they had at least solved the problem of what would be done with them. They all went mad early one morning after spending the night in a single room trying to agree upon the location of a fountain, and were now confined comfortably to an insane asylum at Westport, Connecticut. But, inquired John curiously, who did plan all your wonderful reception rooms and halls, and approaches and bathrooms? Well, answered Percy, I blush to tell you, but it was a moving picture fellow. He was the only man we found who was used to playing with an unlimited amount of money. We did tuck his napkin in his collar and couldn't read or write. Sorry, that just that struck me funny. You can see why an author might take a dig at our movie, man, in the time when they're just starting to come big. As August drew to a close, John began to regret that he must soon go back to school. He and Kismina had decided to elope the following June. It would be nicer to be married here, Kismina confessed. But of course I could never get Father's permission to marry you at all. Next to that, I'd rather elope. It's terrible for wealthy people to be married in America at present. They always have to send out bulletins to the press saying they're going to be married in remnants, and when what they mean is just a peck of old second-hand pearls and some used lace worn by the Empress Eugenie. I know, agreed John fervently. When I was visiting the Schlitzer Murphys, the eldest daughter, Gwendolyn, had married a man whose father owns half West Virginia. She wrote home saying what a tough struggle it were carrying on his salary as a bank clerk, and she ended up saying that, thank God I have 4 good mates anyhow, and that helps a little. It's absurd, commented Kismina. Think of all the millions and millions of people in the world, labourers and all, who get along with only 2 mates. One afternoon, late in August, the chance remark of Kismina has changed the face of the entire situation, and threw John into a state of terror. They was in their favourite grove, and between kisses John were indulging in some romantic forebodings which he fancied added poignancy to their relationship. Sometimes I think we'll never marry, he said sadly. You're too wealthy, too magnificent. No one as rich as you could be like other girls. I should marry the daughter of some well-to-do wholesale hardware man from Omaha or Sioux City, and be content with her $500,000. I knew the daughter of a wholesale hardware man once, remarked Kismina. I don't think you'd have been content with her, as she was a friend of my sister's. She visited here. Ah, then you've had other guests, exclaimed John in surprise. Kismina seemed to regret her words. Oh, yes, she said hurriedly. We've had a few. But weren't your father afraid they'd talk outside? Oh, to some extent. To some extent, she answered. Let's talk about something pleasant. John's curiosity were aroused. Something pleasanter, he demanded. What's so pleasant about that? Aren't they nice girls? To his great surprise, Kismina had begun to weep. Yes, that's the whole trouble. I grew quite attached to some of them. So did Jasmine. But she kept inviting them anyway. I couldn't understand it. A dark suspicion was born in John's heart. Do you mean that they told, and your father had them removed? Worse than that, she muttered brokenly. Father took no chances, and Jasmine kept writing them to come. They had such a good time. She was overcome by a paroxysm of grief. Stunned with the horror of this revelation, John sat there open-mouthed, feeling the nerves of his body twitter like so many sparrows perched upon his spinal column. I've told you when I shouldn't have, she said, calm and suddenly and dry in her dark blue eyes. Do you mean to say that your father had them murdered before they left? She nodded. In August, usually. We're in early September. It's only natural for us to get all the pleasure out of them we can first. How abominable. Why, I must be going crazy. Did you really admit that I did? Interrupted Kismina, shrugging her shoulders. We can't very well imprison them like those aviators, where they'd be a continual reproach to us every day. And it's always been made easier for Jasmine and me, because Father had it done sooner than we expected. In that way we avoided any farewell scene. So you murdered them, huh? Cried John. It was done very nicely. They were drugged while they were asleep, and their families were always told they had died of scarlet fever in Butte. But I fail to understand why you kept on inviting them. I didn't, burst out Kismina. I never invited one. Jasmine did, and there was a very good time. She'd give them the nicest presents towards the last. I shall probably have visitors too. I'll harden up to it. We can't let such an inevitable thing as death stand in the way of enjoying life while we have it. Think how lonesome it would be out here if we never had anyone. My father and mother have sacrificed some of their best friends, just as we have. And so, cried John accusingly, and so you were letting me make love to you, and pretending to return it, and talking about marriage all the time knowing perfectly well I'd never get out of here alive. No, she protested passionately. Not any more. I did at first. You were here. I couldn't help that. and I thought your last days might as well be pleasant for both of us. Then I fell in love with you, and I'm honestly sorry you're going to be put away. I'd rather you be put away than ever kiss another girl. Oh, you would you? Cried John ferociously. Much rather. Besides, I've always heard that a girl can have more fun with a man who she knows she can never marry. Oh, why did I tell you? I've probably spoiled your whole good time now. You were really enjoying things when you didn't know it. I knew it would make things sort of depressing for you. Ah, you did you? John's voice trembled with anger. I've had about enough of this. If you haven't got any more pride and decency than having an affair with a fellow you know isn't much better than a corpse, I want to know if any more to do with you. You're not a corpse, she protested in horror. You're not a corpse. I won't have you saying that I kissed a corpse. I said nothing of the sort. You did. You said I kissed a corpse. I didn't. Their voices had risen, but upon a sudden interruption they both subsided into immediate silence. Footsteps was coming along the path in the direction. A moment later the rose bushes was parted, displaying Braddock Washington, whose intelligent eyes, set in his good-looking vacuous face, was peering at them. "You kissed a corpse?" he demanded in obvious disapproval. "No, nobody," answered Gizmina quickly. "We were just joking." "What are you two doing here, anyhow?" he demanded gruffly. "Gizmina, you ought to be reading or playing golf with your sister. Go read, go play golf. Let me find you here when I come back." And he bowed at John and went up the path. "See?" said Gizmina crossly when he were out of hearing. "You've spoiled it all. You can never meet any more. You won't let me meet you. You'd have you poisoned if you thought we were in love." "We're not any more," cried John fiercely, so he could send his mind at rest. Upon that, "Moreover, don't fool yourself that I'm going to stay around here. Inside of 6 hours I'll be over those mountains if I have to gnaw passes through them and on my way east." They both got on their feet, and at this remark, Gizmina came close and put her arm through his. "I'm going too." "You must be crazy." "Of course I'm going," she interrupted patiently. "You most certainly are not. You—" "Very well," she said quietly. "I'll catch up with father now and talk it over with him." Defeated, John mustered a sickly smile. "Very well, dearest," he agreed, with pale and unconvincing affection. "We'll go together." His love for her returned and settled placidly on his arm. She would go with him to share his dangers. He put his arms about her and kissed her fervently. After all, she loved him. She had saved him, in fact. Discussing the matter, they walked slowly back towards the chateau. They decided that since Braddock Washington had seen them together, they had best depart the next night. Nevertheless, John's lips was unusually dry at dinner, and he nervously emptied a great spoonful of peacock soup into his left lung. He had to be carried into the turquoise and sable card room and pounded on the back by one of the underbutlers, which Percy considered a great joke. That's the end of chapter 8. And here we have the shocking twist at the end. Of course, you don't get to leave with all the secrets. It was kind of obvious, if I'm honest. I sort of expected it, but you know. It's nice to see the rich people being evil and rich again. But yeah. Still, at least he found that before the end. Before the end? I guess, well, yeah, before it happened, I suppose. Could have just been a tragedy where it happened without his realising it, so. Let's see how poor old John gets out of this, shall we? Or if poor old John gets out of this, I should say. Chapter 9. Long after midnight, John's body gave a nervous jerk, and he sat suddenly upright, staring into the veils of somnolence that draped the room. Through the squares of blue darkness that were his open windows, he heard a faint far-away sound that died upon a bed of wind before identifying itself in his memory, clouded with uneasy dreams. With the sharp noise that had succeeded, it were nearer, just outside the room. The click of a turned knob, a footstep, a whisper he could not tell. An hard lump gathered in the pit of his stomach, and his whole body ached in the moment that he strained agonisingly to hear. Then one of the veils seemed to dissolve, and he saw a vague figure standing by the door, a figure only faintly limned and blocked in upon the darkness, mingled so with the folds of the drapery as to seem distorted, like a reflection seen in a dirty pane of glass. With a sudden movement of fright and of resolution, John pressed a button by his bedside. The next moment he was sitting in the green sunken bath of the adjoining room, waked to alertness by the shock of the cold water which half filled him. He sprung out, and, his wet pyjamas scattering an heavy trickle of water behind him, ran for the aquamarine door which he knew led out onto the ivory landing to the second floor. The door opened noiselessly. A single crimson lamp burning in a great dome above lit the magnificent sweep of carved stairway with a poignant beauty. For a moment John hesitated, appalled by the silent splendour massed about him, seeming to envelop in its gigantic folds and contours the solitary drenched little figure shivering upon the ivory landing. And simultaneously two things happened. The door of his own sitting room swung open, precipitating 3 naked negroes into the hall, and, as John swayed in wild terror towards the stairway, another door slid back in the wall on the other side of the corridor, and John saw Braddock Washington standing on the lighted lift, wearing a fur coat and a pair of riding boots, which reached to his knees and displayed, above the glow of his rose-coloured pyjamas. On the instant the 3 negroes, John had never seen any of them before, and it flashed through his mind they must be the professional executioners, paused in their movement towards John, and turned expectantly towards the man in the lift, who burst out with an imperious command. "Get in here, all 3 of you, quick as hell." Then, within the instant, the 3 negroes darted into the cage. The oblong of light were blotted out as the lift door shut, and John were again alone in the hall. He slumped weakly down against an ivory stair. It was apparent that something portentous had occurred, something which, for the moment at least, had postponed his own petty disaster. What were it? Had the negroes risen in revolt? Had the aviators forced aside the iron bars of the grating? Or had the men of fish stumbled blindly through the hills and gazed with bleak, joyless eyes upon the gaudy valley? John did not know. He had a faint whir of air as the lift whizzed up again, and then a moment later, as it descended, it was probable that Percy were hurrying to his father's assistance. It occurred to John that this were his opportunity to join Kismine and plan an immediate escape. He waited until the lift had been silent for several minutes, shivering a little with the night cool that whipped it through his wet pyjamas. He returned to his room and dressed himself quickly. Then he mounted a long flight of stairs and turned down the corridor carpeted with Russian sable, which led to Kismine's suite. The door of her sitting room was open, and the lamps was lighted. Kismine, in an Angora kimono, stood near the window of the room, in a listening attitude, and John entered noiselessly. She turned towards him. "Oh, it's you," she whispered across the room to him. "Did you hear them?" "I heard your father's slaves in my—" "No," she interrupted excitedly. "Aeroplanes." "Aeroplanes? Perhaps that was the sound that woke me." "There's at least a dozen. I saw one a few moments ago, dead against the moon. The guard back by the cliff fired his rifle, and that's what roused Father. We're going to open on them right away." "Are they here on purpose?" "Yes, it's that Italian who got away." Simultaneous with her last words, a succession of sharp cracks tumbled in through the open window. Kismine muttered a little cry, took a penny with her fumbling fingers from a box in her dresser, and ran to one of the electric lights. In an instant the entire chateau were in darkness. She had blown out the fuse. "Come on," she cried to him. "We'll go up to the roof garden and watch it from there." Drawing a cape about her, she took his hand. They found their way out of the door. They were only a step to the tower lift, and as she pressed the button that shot them upwards, he put his arms round her in the darkness and kissed her mouth. The romance had come to John Unger at last. A minute later they had stepped out onto the star-white platform. Above, under the misty moon, sliding in and out of the patches of cloud that eddied below it, floated a dozen dark-winged bodies in a constant circling course. From here and there in the valley, flashes of fire lit towards them, followed by sharp detonations. Kismine clapped her hands with pleasure, which a moment later turned to dismay, as the aeroplanes, at some pre-arranged signal, began to release their bombs, and the whole of the valley became a panorama of deep reverberant sound and lurid light. Before long, the aim of their attackers had become concentrated upon 3 of the points where the anti-aircraft guns were situated. One of them were almost immediately reduced to a giant cinder, and lay smouldering in a park of rose bushes. "Kismine," Big John, "you'll be glad when I tell you that the attack come on the eve of my murder. If I hadn't heard the guard shoot off his gun back with that pass, I should be stone dead now. I can't hear you, cried Gizmino, intent on the scene before her. You'll have to talk louder. I simply said, shouted John, we'd better get out of here before they've begun to shell the chateau. Suddenly the old portico of the negro quarters cracked asunder. A geyser of flame shot up from under the colonnades, and great fragments of jagged marble rolled as far as the border of the lake. There go $50,000 worth of slaves, cried Gizmino, at pre-war prices. So few Americans have any respect for property. John renewed his efforts to compel her to leave. The aim of the aeroplanes was becoming more precise minute by minute, and only 2 of the anti-aircraft guns were still retaliating. It was obvious that the garrison, encircled with fire, could not hold out much longer. Come on, cried John, pulling Gizmino's arm. We've got to go. Do you realise that those aviators will kill you without question if they find you? She consented reluctantly. We'll have to wake Jasmine, she said as they hurried towards the lift. Then she added in a sort of childish delight, we'll be poor, won't we? Like people in books. I'll be an orphan and utterly free. Free and poor, what fun! She stopped and raised her lips to him with a delighted kiss. It's impossible to be both together, said John grimly. People have found that out. I should choose to be free as preferable of the two. There's an extra precaution, you better lump the contents of your jewel box into your pockets. 10 minutes later, the 2 girls met John in a dark corridor. They descended to the main floor of the chateau. Passing for the last time through the magnificence of the splendid halls, they stood for a moment out on the terrace, watching the burning negro quarters and the flaming embers, the 2 planes which had fallen on the other side of the lake. A solitary gun was still keeping up a sturdy peppering, and the attackers seemed timorous about the send and lower. They sent their thunderous fireworks in a circle round it, till any chance shot might annihilate its Ethiopian crew. John and the 2 sisters passed down the marble steps, turned sharply to the left, and began to ascend a narrow path that wound like a garter about the Diamond Mountain. Gizmino knew a heavily wooded spot halfway up where they could lie concealed, yet be able to observe the wild night in the valley. Finally, they make an escape, when it should be necessary, along a secret path laid in a rocky gully. That's the end of chapter 9. Well, well, well. Airplanes to the rescue. And of course, a narrow escape from a deadly plot. Chapter 10. It was 3 o'clock when they attained their destination. The obliging and phlegmatic Jasmine fell off to sleep immediately, leaning against the trunk of a large tree, while John and Gizmino sat, his arm around her, and watched the desperate ebb and flow of the dying battle among the ruins of the vista that had been guarding the spot this morning. Shortly after 4 o'clock, the last remaining gun gave out a clanging sound and went out of action in a swift tongue of red smoke. Though the moon was down, they saw the flying bodies were circling closer to the earth. When the planes had made certain that the beleaguered possessed no further resources, they would land, and the dark and glittering reign of the Washingtons would be over. With the cessation of the fire in the valley grew quiet. The embers of the 2 aeroplanes glowed like the eyes of some monster crouching in the grass. The chateau stood dark and silent, beautiful without light as it had been beautiful in the sun, while the woody rattles of Nemesis filled the air above with growing and receding complaint. And John perceived that Gizmino, like her sister, had fallen sound asleep. It was long after 4 when he became aware of footsteps along the path they had lately followed, and he waited in breathless silence until the person to whom they belonged had passed the vantage point he occupied. There was a faint stir in the air now that were not of human origin, and the dew was cold. He knew that the dawn would break soon. John waited until the steps had gone a safe distance up the mountain and were inaudible. Then he followed. About halfway to the steep summit, the trees fell away, and a hard saddle of rocks spread itself over the diamond beneath. Just before he reached this point, he slowed down his pace, warned by an animal sense that there were life just ahead of him. Coming to an hard boulder, he lifted his head gradually above its edge. His curiosity was rewarded. This is what he saw. Braddock Washington was standing there motionless, silhouetted against the grey sky without sound or sign of life. As the dawn come up out of the east, lending a cold green colour to the earth, it brought the solitary figure into insignificant contrast with a new day. While John watched, his host remained for a few moments absorbed in some inscrutable contemplation. Then he signalled to the two negroes who crouched at his feet to lift the burden which lay between them. As they struggled upright, the first yellow beam of the sun struck through the innumerable prisms of immense and exquisitely chiselled diamond. A white radiance rekindled that glowed upon the air like fragments of the morning star. The bearers staggered beneath its weight for a moment. Then their rippling muscles caught and hardened under the wet shine of their skins, and the three figures were again motionless in their defiant impotency before the heavens. After a while, the white man lifted his head and slowly raised his arms in a gesture of attention, as one who would call a great crowd to hear. There were no crowd. The vast silence of the mountain and sky, broken by faint bird voices down among the trees. The figure on the saddle rock began to speak ponderously, with an inextinguishable pride. "You out there," he cried in a trembling voice. "You there." He paused, his arm still uplifted, his head held attentively as though he were expecting an answer. John strained his eyes to see whether there might be men coming down the mountain, but the mountain would bear of human life. There were only sky and a mocking flute of wind among the treetops. Would Washington be praying? For a moment John wondered. Then the illusion passed. There was something in the man's whole attitude antithetical to prayer. "Oh, you above there." The voice would become strong and confident. This was no forlorn supplication. If anything, there were a quality of monstrous condescension. "You there." Words too quickly uttered to be understood, flowing one at the other. John listened breathlessly, catching a phrase here and there, while the voice broke off, resumed, broke off again, now strong and argumentative, now coloured with a slow, puzzled impatience. Then a conviction commenced to dawn on the single listener, and as a realisation crept over him, a spray of quick blood rushed through his arteries. Braddock Washington were offering a bribe to God. At Ritz, there were no doubt. The diamond in the arms of his slave, some advanced samples, promised with more to follow. That, John perceived after a time, with a thread running through his sentences. Prometheus enriched, were calling the witness forgotten sacrifices, forgotten rituals, prayers obsolete before the birth of Christ. For a while his discourse took the form of reminding God of this gift or that which divinity had deigned to accept from them. Great churches, if he would rescue cities from a plague, gifts of myrrh and gold, of human lives, of beautiful women and captive armies, of children and queens, of beasts of the forest and field, sheep and goats, harvests and cities, whole conquered lands that had been offered up in lust or blood for his appeasement, buying a need's worth of alleviation from the divine wrath. And now he, Braddock Washington, Emperor of Diamonds, King and Priest of the Age of Gold, arbiter of splendour and luxury, would offer up a treasure such as princes before him had never dreamed of. Offer it up not in supplication, not in suppliance, but in pride. He would give to God, he continued, getting down to specifications, the greatest diamond in the world. This diamond would be cut with many more thousand facets than there were leaves on a tree. And the old diamond would be shaped with the perfection of a stone no bigger than a flower. Many men would work upon it for many years. It would be set in a great dome of beaten gold, wonderfully carved and equipped with gates of opal and crusted sapphire. In the middle would be an hollowed out chapel, presided over by an altar of iridescent, decomposing, ever-changing radium, which would burn out the eyes of any worshipper who lifted up his head from prayer. And on this altar there would be slain for the amusement of the divine benefactor any victim he should choose, even though it should be the greatest and most powerful man alive. In return he asked only a simple thing, a thing that for God would be absurdly easy, only that matters should be as they were yesterday, at this hour, and that they should so remain. So very simple. Let but the heavens open, swallowing these men and their aeroplanes, and then close again. Let him have his slaves once more restored to life and well. There were no one else whom he had ever needed to treat or bargain. He doubted only whether he had made his bribe big enough. God had his price, of course. God was made in man's image, so it had been said. He must have his price. And the price would be rare. No cathedral whose building consumed many years, no pyramid constructed by 10,000 workmen would be like this cathedral, this pyramid. He paused here. This was his proposition. Everyone would be up to specification, and there were nothing vulgar in his assertion that it would be cheap at the price. He implied that Providence could take it or leave it. As he approached the end, his sentences become broken, become short and uncertain. His body seemed tense, seemed strained to catch the slightest pressure of a whisper, a life in the spaces around him. His hair had turned gradually white as he talked, and now he lifted his head high to the heavens like a prophet of old, magnificently mad. Then, as John stared in giddy fascination, it seemed to him that a curious phenomenon took place somewhere around him. It was as though the sky had darkened for an instant, as though there had been a sudden murmur in a gust of wind, the sound of faraway trumpets, a sign like the rustle of a great silken robe. For a time the whole of nature round about partook of this darkness. The birds' song ceased, the trees were still. Far over the mountain there were a mutter of dull, menacing thunder. That were all. The wind died along the tall grasses of the valley. The dawn and the day resumed their place and time. The risen sun sent hot waves of yellow mist that made its path bright before it. The leaves laughed in the sun, and their laughter shook the trees, until each bough was like a girl's school in fairyland. God had refused to accept the bribe. For another moment John watched the triumph of the day. In turn he saw a flutter of brown down by the lake, then another flutter, then another, like a dance of golden angels alighting from a cloud. The aeroplanes had come to earth. John slid off the boulder and ran down the side of the mountain to the clump of trees, where the two girls was awake and waiting for him. Gizmina sprang to her feet, the jewels in her pockets jingling, a question on her parted lips. Instinct told John that there were no time for words. They must get off the mountain without losing a moment. He seized an hand of each, and in silence they threaded the tree trunks, washed with light now and with the rising mist. Behind them from the valley come no sound at all, except the complaint of the peacocks far away, the pleasant undertones of morning. When they had gone about half a mile, they avoided the parkland and entered a narrow path that led over the rise of the ground. At the highest point of this they paused and turned around. Their eyes rested upon the mountainside they had just left, oppressed by some dark sense of tragic impendency. Clear against the sky, a broken white-haired man was slowly descending the steep slope, followed by two gigantic and emotionless negroes who carried a burden between them which still flashed and glittered in the sun. Halfway down, two other figures joined them. John could see that they were Mrs. Washington and her son, upon whose arm she leaned. The aviators had clambered from their machines to the sweeping lawn in front of the chateau, and, with rifles in hand, were starting up the Diamond Mountain in skirmishing formation. But the little group of fire, which had formed further up and were engrossing all the watch's attention, had stopped upon a ledge of rock. The negroes stooped and pulled up what appeared to be a trapdoor in the side of the mountain. Into this they all disappeared, the white-eyed man first, then his wife and son, while only the two negroes, the glittering tip of whose jewelled dresses caught the sun for a moment, before the trapdoor descended and engulfed them all. Gizmina clutched John's arm. "Oh," she cried wistfully, "where are they going? What are they going to do? Must be some underground way of escape." A little scream from the two girls interrupted his sentence. "Don't you see?" sobbed Gizmina hysterically. "The mountain is wired." Even as she spoke, John put up his hand to shield his sight. Before their eyes, the whole surface of the mountain had changed suddenly to a dazzling, burning yellow, which showed up through the jacket of the turf as a light shows through a human hand. For a moment the intolerable glow continued, and then, like an extinguished filament, it disappeared, revealing a black waste from which blue smoke arose slowly, carrying off with it what remained of vegetation and of human flesh. Of the aviators there were neither blood nor bone. They were as consumed as completely as the 5 souls who had gone inside. Simultaneously, and with an immense concussion, the chateau literally threw itself into the air, burst into flaming fragments as it rose, and then tumbling back upon itself in a smouldering pile that lay projecting half under the water of the lake. There were no fire. What smoke there were drifted off, mingling with the sunshine, and for a few minutes longer a powdery dust of marble drifted from this great featureless pile that had once been the House of Jewels. There were no more sound. The three people were alone in the valley. This next chapter is labelled as chapter 9, but I'm fairly certain it's meant to be chapter 11. Unless there is some great symbolism that I'm not understanding in these mislabelled chapters. I'm just going to assume it is. So, chapter 11. At sunset, John and his two companions reached the hard cliff which had marked the boundaries of the Washington's dominion, and, looking back, found the valley tranquil and lovely in the dusk. They sat down to finish the food which Jasmine had brought with her in a basket. "There," she said, as she spread the tablecloth and put sandwiches into a neat pile upon it. "Don't they look tempting? I always think the food tastes better outdoors." With that remarked Kismina, Jasmine enters the middle class. "Now," said John eagerly, "turn out your pockets and let's see what jewels you brought along. If you made a good selection, we're free to live comfortably all the rest of our lives." Obediently, Kismina put her hand in her pocket and tossed 2 handfuls of glittering stones before him. "Not so bad," cried John enthusiastically. "They aren't very big, but... Hello?" His expression changed as he held one of them up to the declining sun. "What, these aren't diamonds? There's something the matter?" "My golly!" exclaimed Kismina with a startled look. "What an idiot I am!" "Why, these are rhinestones!" cried John. "I know!" She broke into a laugh. "I opened the wrong drawer. They belonged to the dress of a girl who visited Jasmine. I got her to give them to me in exchange for diamonds. I'd never seen anything with precious stones before." "And this is what you brought?" "I'm afraid so." She fingered the brilliants wistfully. "I think I like these better. I'm a little tired of diamonds." "Very well," said John gloomily. "We'll have to live in Hades. And you will grow old telling incredulous women that you got the wrong drawer. Unfortunately, your father's bank books were consumed with him. Well, what's the matter with Hades? If I come home with a wife at my age, my father is just as liable not to cut me off with a hot coal, as they say down there." Jasmine spoke up. "I love washing," she said quietly. "I've always washed my own handkerchiefs. I'll take in a laundry and support you both." "Do they have washwomen in Hades?" asked Kismina innocently. "Of course," answered John. "It's just like anywhere else." "I thought perhaps it was too hot to wear any clothes." John laughed. "Just try it," he suggested. "They'll run you out before you're half started." "Will father be there?" she asked. John turned in astonishment. "Your father is dead," he replied somberly. "Why should he go to Hades? Ever confused with another place that were abolished long ago?" After supper they folded up the tablecloth and spread the blankets for the night. "What a dream it was," Kismina sighed, gazing up at the stars. "How strange it seems to be here, with one dress and a penniless fiancé." "Under the stars," she repeated. "I never noticed the stars before. I always thought of them as great big diamonds that belonged to someone. Now they frighten me. They make me feel that it was all a dream, all my youth." "It was a dream," said John quietly. "Everybody's youth is a dream, a form of chemical madness." "How pleasant, then, to be insane." "So I'm told," said John gloomily. "I don't know any longer. At any rate, let's be in love for a while, for a year or so, you and me. That's a form of divine drunkenness that we can all try. There are only diamonds in the old world, diamonds, and perhaps the shady gift of disillusion. Well, I have that last. I'll make the usual nothing of it." He shivered. "Turn up your coat collar, little girl. The night's full of chill, and you'll get pneumonia. It was a great sin who first invented consciousness. Let's lose it for a few hours." So, wrapping himself in his blanket, he fell asleep. And that is the end, in more ways than one, The diamond as big as the Ritz. And isn't it something, eh? Right, let's head over somewhere a little bit more comfortable and do our last little thoughts, shall we? First, a swallow of water. Still, not too bad time-wise. It's a little under 2 hours. I hope it didn't feel like I was rushing. I wasn't trying to, but it did feel like a story that called for a slightly faster pace than I normally do, or I have done with some of these at least. But yeah, I think it all worked out alright. What to make of it though? Certainly it is an interesting story. A little bit more allegorical than a lot of Fitzgerald stuff. A little bit more abstract too. And obviously a little bit more absurd. Well, quite a bit more absurd. Unlike the somewhat believable tale of Jay Gatsby, whose entire life is fake certainly, but who nevertheless lives in the real world with real people and has human connections. Here we see the richest possible people, completely disconnected from the real world. Real lunatics, a lot of them. Monstrous in their wealth, completely detached. Maintain a large, well, what would you say? A large staff of slaves who still believe slavery is legal. Bringing in people so they can pretend to be normal and then kill them off so they don't reveal their secrets. Maintaining it all through murder and a wealth that is impossible to calculate. Kept only as assets across the world and never paying a liquor tax. Now, don't that just sound familiar, eh? It's funny, really. I sort of get the sense this story is meant to be sort of a funny, amusing tale of, you know, rich people beyond measure, sort of a joke that, you know, no one could ever really be that rich, right? No one could be so detached from humanity. Well, it's still kind of funny, but, how would you say? Not ha-ha funny, you know? Still, it was interesting. Like I say, the rich people in this, despite being monstrous and evil, are at least more interesting than real rich people. You know, develop a whole secret hidden world in this incredible dreamland palace. At least that's interesting. I'm sure they're monstrous, but at least they're honest in their monstrosity. What else is there to say? There's something quite fun. I'll tell you what, what did strike me actually is the scene trying to bribe God is funny. But the fact that God definitely did listen, right? Like he didn't accept the bribe, but the world did stand still and darken for a moment as God thought about it. That I quite like. That feels to me like a distinctly American idea. I'm sure God might be all benevolent and all good, but if you get half of that good, you've got to at least think about it, right? He's only human after all. Or well, made in man's image as well. Yeah, what else is there to say on the matter? I think generally it is quite a good story. Not entirely typical for Fitzgerald. A little bit more absurd, a little bit more out of the realm of the real, but very fun. Again, almost like a pastiche of his normal stuff. Stupid over-the-top rich people. But I think that's about all I've got to say on the matter, so... As always, I do appreciate all of you for being here, and I hope you've enjoyed the story of the night. We ran a little longer than I planned to, but it was a good one and I've enjoyed it. I'm feeling good and hopefully we'll do another one tomorrow. Maybe tackling one of the ones we've already started though, eh? As always, I hope whatever time it is, you're very welcome Abby, you're very welcome playing. Yeah, as always, I hope you have a very lovely rest of your day, whatever time it should be. And that it should last for you as long as it is until the next time I stream, when you have to be back here for my blessing. I'll continue pushing this bit. I don't know if it helps retention, but I find it funny. So yeah. Yeah, thank you all very much. I hope you've had a lovely day. Is there anyone live to raid? No one who I really know. It's like so. I think I'm just going to call it here. Yeah. I do hope you have a lovely rest of your day. And, as always... Oh, give you 1 minute, okay. Well, never mind then. I guess we're gonna what's the term? Vamp for a little bit. What can we vamp on? We did all the Fitzgerald poems, didn't we? What have we got? There's that 8-page story, but what have we got? I've got a little book of Mark Twain quotes. Oh, and the ads about to start. That's no good. Let's do the ads. Yeah. Okay, we'll go through some Mark Twain quotes. This isn't a book that, technically speaking, I shouldn't be reading this to you because this book was published in like 1960 something. But I've got it, and yeah, or 1970 something, and it's just Mark Twain quotes. So they're all going out eventually. Oh, well, with that. Oh. Okay, that's nepotism. Me? Would I unfairly favour people? Are they? Speaking of, hope you enjoy your thing. Again, if you ever want a head model or another role, let me know. Yeah, absolutely, it's nepotism. If any of you guys who have VIP or any of the other roles want a nepotistic favour from me, I'll absolutely give it to you. Anyway, you're not showing up on the button, so I'm just going to manually do that. Whoop. Hey, yeah. Hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, thank you for watching, everyone. Good time until the next one. As always, ta-ra.